I want to just give a quick disclaimer. If I do my job today, everyone here is going to be agitated. Is that good or bad? Well,
that's good. Good. That's good.
Because what we're going to be dealing with are things that potentially could change your life. Now, you say, "Listen, Rabbi, all the Torah is life-changing. It's all, and that's true." But we're going to be dealing with a lot of the core aspects, and our core philosophical, theological roots of our religion, and the hope is that we're going to really address the major issues that make or break our religion, and if we are to accept the evidence, the proofs, the discussion, we may have to deal with some internal turmoil and agitation. That's just a disclaimer off the bat. The plan is to cover a wide range of philosophical, even theological. Even the theology is not a thing that Jews are really good at. We don't talk so much about God. We don't know so much about God. We readily admit that. Maybe the one areas that rabbis are encouraged to say, "I don't know." It's like we don't know so much about it. There's so much about God, at least if we accept our definition of God, that we don't know. We don't know the answers because we're incapable of understanding some things. We're limited. And that's fine. But we will try to discuss that as well. But proofs, perspectives about God, about Judaism, about Torah, and also we're not going to shy away from dealing with some of the problems. And because there are some problems, obviously. Maimonides deals with problems, and if he could deal with the problems, so could we. So there are some problems and just things that need to be ironed out to have that strong foundation for accepting, adopting Judaism and Torah as a true ideal. Okay? Now, why is it important? You say, "Rabbi, I believe. I grew up Jewish. I went to Jewish day schools. I sent my kids to Jewish schools. I would go to shul every week. I believe. I'm in. I'm a Karkei member of the tribe." Why is it important for us to go through the motions of understanding what the roots are of our religion? Is that a legitimate question?
Yeah.
It is. Okay, but the answer is that it's very important for a number of reasons. Number one, in our religion, we do not suffice. It's not good enough for us when someone says, "I believe." Right? Belief is often shunned by Jewish literature. Right? Maimonides famously says, we're not trying to deal with faith. We're trying to understand. We're a very cerebral religion. We're a religion that's rooted in intellectual principles. Right? Abraham became who he is via deduction, via understanding, via calculations, via rationalization, being reasonable. Right? Belief is associated with someone saying, "I don't know, but I believe." It's a leap of faith. We don't believe that, so we don't endorse that. Right? Maimonides says, the Torah says, you have to know, you have to understand, you have to have firm intellectual roots for what you are doing. The Muslims believe, and the Christians believe, and the Hindus believe, and the Tudors believe, and everyone believes, right? Are we no different than them? Are we just card-carrying members of what our parents and our society and our school and our neighborhood and our communities told us to believe? Or are we different? Well, but everyone really is different. And the question is, are we going to be an intellectual cop-out and say, "Well, I grew up Jewish, I'm asking too much questions"? Or are we going to say, "No, I'm going to examine, I'm going to try to see, is there basis, does it make sense, is it rational, is it reasonable, or am I just settling for a simplistic attitude towards the way I'm going to live my life?" So that's number one. The reason why it's important to go through this exercise is because faith is not enough. We want knowledge. We want understanding. We want intellectual principles. Number two, the Torah demands of us, "Da ma shetashiv la'apikoros." You should know how to respond to a skeptic.
That's important.
There is a responsibility for us to not only understand, but understand to the degree that we could teach. And not only understand to the degree that we could teach, but we could debate with someone who's a skeptic. So deep is the requirement of us understanding what our religion is based upon that we are required to know how to engage in polemics, how to engage in debate, how to convince someone who's a skeptic. So we have to become experts. Basically, we're required to become experts in Judaism. So hence, what we're going to try to do in this course is to try to the best of our abilities, become experts, or at least in the basic fundamental principles, and to learn a little bit about how, if someone doesn't know, we could teach them as well. Lynn, I see you have a question.
I just wanted to compliment you on the agitation because Ezer Connecto is definitely the agitation. No, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing because,
It helps you to grasp.
we have complacency. Everyone has complacency.
Yeah.
Everyone. And no one wants to be told that they should be doing more. No one wants to. Right? No matter how religious observant you are or how not observant you are, people are very comfortable with their lives. Now, if we deduce, we understand, we learn that we have responsibilities, it's very unnerving. It's very disturbing. Right? It's agitating. Right? So that's why, hopefully, if we're successful, we'll be agitated as well, and that's okay. And that's part of the challenge, I'll say, is that we're going to have to deal with our internal biases. I have a friend who's friend of mine who we meet for lunch every week, and he's we have these debates, like 2-hour debates once a week for lunch. It's been going on for months and months now, and we're on different sides of a certain perspective, and I have so much invested in my side, and he has so much invested in his side. If someone convinced me today that Islam was right, which it isn't, and we'll be able to prove that. That's not a leap. But I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to leave Young Israel. I'm going to say, people in my shul, I'm out. I'll go to the Torah people and say, listen, I'm sorry. I'll tell my wife, listen, I'm becoming Muhammad Wolbe, right? That would be hard for me to do, right? Yeah. Because I have a certain identity. I have a certain place in society, right? We all have who we are as people, how we identify as individuals. For us to challenge that is very unsettling, right? So we all have a certain bias to keep status quo, to maintain it in the way it is now, and the implications of what we may discover, hopefully, will convince us that the Torah is true and it's real, and that implies that if it's real, that it's binding, and having binding responsibilities is very unnerving. So that's why I wanted to give that as a preface, as a disclaimer. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? So I don't exactly have the syllabus, as I think it's called. I don't have the syllabus planned, but the general idea is we're going to be dealing with the Torah narrative. There's a lot of things that are going on in the Torah. We're not going to go item by item, individually analyzing each and every one, but we're going to deal with, is it true? Is it historical? Can we prove it? What's the evidence? So is the historical narrative of the Torah, the accuracy of the Torah that we have today. We have Torah, but it's, according to the Jewish calculation, it's 3,324 years old. Like, how do we know that this is the same thing? And the second it's not the same thing, the second we call into question the accuracy of what we have today from the Torah, well, then the entire book is in question. If you were to take, let's say, the written Torah, for example, and you say that we could prove or we could question any verse in it or any one verse, then, well, maybe the entire thing goes into question. It means there has to be a certain completeness in the accuracy of what we have today for us to claim that our Judaism today is the Judaism that we're supposed to be observing, or we're supposed to be learning and teaching to our children, etc. So that's why the transmission process of when, let's say, 3,300 years is a long time. A lot of stuff could happen. And we have a Torah that we claim, at least, is the same Torah. The written Torah, it's all the same, 304,805 letters. I think that's meant the letters in the Torah. All those are the letters, and it hasn't changed. Well, how does that happen? We have 2,000 different versions of the Christian Bible. Who's to say that our one unified version of the Jewish Bible is the same one that Moses got? And that's a core principle, because the second you question Maimonides' rights, it says that, listen, one of the 13 principles of faith is that this Torah is the same Torah and it's not changing. Because the second there's any sort of debate or misunderstanding or question as to is this the same Torah, well, then the whole thing goes out the window. So that's another thing that and hopefully I think we will also be dealing with evidence for existence of God, even though that will come in, I think, more as an ancillary discussion more than the primary discussion, because I think that's something which is much easy. It's an easier obstacle to overcome. It's easier. Most people already don't have any doubt in that matter as well. Okay, so I wanted to start. Maybe one more disclaimer. I think that questions are encouraged, like I mentioned. Try to keep them to the point. I'm not going to penalize anyone if they go off topic. But I also want to encourage people to think on their own, because if we're going to be dealing with, if we're going to be engaging in
Here's a chair. There's a chair here.
I'll do it. So
it's okay. If we're going to be presenting ideas, and I have a lot of ideas that I hope to present today, I want everyone to weigh them. Is there legitimacy? And if there's a problem, we're going to do it together. We're going to try and make it a collaborative effort, and everyone participate. I'm not presenting things for you to think. I want to present ideas that we could bounce around and see if it's legitimate. Okay? So I wanted to start off with, I think, what could be considered like a very good starting point for this entire discussion. And that's the idea of the supernatural. If you open up the Torah, you open up even Genesis, and you read a lot of different narratives and stories where supernatural things happen. We have Abraham is talking to God. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I've never met anyone, or that's an experience that we're not familiar with. So the Torah is describing a certain supernatural experience. We have that with Isaac. We have that with Jacob. Jacob has a dream, and there's a ladder, and there's angels, and Abraham encountered those angels. All these stories already from the times of Genesis. You move on to the rest of the books of the Torah. Right? From the beginning of the Exodus, really till the end, is basically 40 years. So if the first book of the Torah of Genesis covers about 2,000 years, the last four, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, are only 40 years. And in fact, Deuteronomy is only a couple of days. It's within 1 year. And once you get there, you see miracles almost on every page. Miracles, when I say miracles, I mean things that are supernatural, things that we haven't experienced. Right? For example, you see famously Moses is speaking. There's a burning bush, and the bush he's able to communicate. He starts to communicate with God. He sees a bush burning, and the bush is not being consumed. We're all familiar with that image. We see Moses does miracles. He takes a staff and turns into a serpent. Everyone's familiar with these narratives. We have the 10 plagues. Each of these plagues are supernatural occurrences. Entire Nile River turns into blood. That's a narrative told in the Torah. The 10 plagues, all the firstborn dying, the splitting of the sea into 12 different walkable dry paths. Right? A lot of miracles. What we're going to try to do is to say, okay, these miracles, do they mean anything? Right? Suppose they're true. Right? We're going to try to deal with this very rigidly. Let's assume they're true. What does it imply? Because even if a miracle is true, and we could prove that there was a miracle that happened, if you walk outside and you went across the street and saw the bayou, and I walked out with you guys and the bayou was all the way very high, and I said, split the bayou, and the bayou split. You would say that's a miracle. You guys saw it yourself, right? But then I say, it implies X. Just because we have a miracle, the miracle doesn't necessarily prove anything. Or maybe it does prove something. But that's a legitimate question. Right? If Jesus walked on water, let's assume it's true. Let's assume it's true. Right? Let's assume it's true. Does it imply anything? That's a legitimate question. So all these miracles, what we're going to try to do is we're going to examine, okay, how could we prove one way or the other whether or not it's true? The veracity, the historicity of said event. Second of all, we're also going to say, okay, fine, what does it imply? Assuming it's true. Okay? Yes?
It's interesting how you're starting out with the miracles, and there are so many miracles, and, we're not supposed to rely on them. We're not supposed to expect the impossible. And the miracles that we have today are really different kinds of miracles than the miracles that were then. They're supernatural in the sense that the likelihood that certain things would happen is sort of, you can't really, the likelihood that something would happen is sort of unbelievable. It's sort of supernatural, but yet it happens. But it's different than the miracles that we see in the Bible.
Yeah, so I agree with you 100%. When we're talking about miracles, we're talking about things that are out of the ordinary. So like if you took a helicopter and you happen to have had the technology for a helicopter 2,000 years ago, people will be sure that that's a miracle because it's not normal, right? It's not, but we know it's not necessarily supernatural. It's just actually a collaboration of lots of different technologies that are able to, right? If you
The cargo cults.
the cargo cults, what's that?
In the South Pacific, the natives building, facsimiles of airplanes.
And then
Worshiping them.
yeah.
But my point was that everyday occurrences are really miracles.
Yeah, so what you're saying is a famous statement of Nachmanides, the great 12th and 13th century scholar, who said, yes, the fact that your heart's beating without a battery for 90 years, that's a miracle. It's considered a hidden miracle because it's so common.
And even though science may be able to explain a lot of things, and we're very technologically advanced, there's still certain things that we can't explain that are supernatural, that are miracles, that with all of our knowledge, we can even be more appreciative of everyday occurrences of miracles than, because back then it really was superstition. A lot of things were unexplainable because the people were not as educated.
I don't understand what you're trying to say, Lynn.
No, I'm just saying that in the Bible, it just seems like there are a lot of miracles, and for them, I think they were just as miraculous and as supernatural as things that have a lot of explanations today, but it goes beyond the explanations. The babies being born, the hearts beating.
So you're saying that miracles that we view today as supernatural, they're more commonplace? Is that what you're saying?
That the miracles today are just as amazing as the miracles
Yes,
that took place
yes,
then,
that's
with our understanding now compared to the understanding then. Or more so.
Yeah, but the miracles aren't necessarily of supernatural. I think that's your point. I think if you say, hey, listen, we have.
I think the miracles are supernatural.
Well, not super, but definition of supernatural means it's outside of the laws of nature. Nature itself is miraculous.
Well, even if you explain how babies are born, even if you understand from A to Z, it's still a miracle. I think everyone would agree. 100%. Well, it's still a miracle. Well, technically, the term natural means that it's within nature. So yeah, nature is miraculous, 100%. And I do believe that if you just think about the miracle of It goes beyond natural. Because there are things that science cannot explain.
yeah, that's
It
true.
goes beyond the natural.
That's true. And also, if you think about the fact that there's 8.7 million species creeping this earth, and just today I saw an article that they found in Peru, a bunch of species of see-through frogs. And saw that story? Like these frogs that have translucent skin, and you can see inside. Basically, you see like a heart, the heart pumping and the bones, everything. And well, yeah, but that itself is a miracle. Right? The fact, how could that have happened without God? It really couldn't have. The odds are just too crazy.
It's like subatomic particles that there actually are. They actually demonstrated that they can be in two places simultaneously. That's just I mean, that's either supernatural or you wind up scrambling for all kinds of stuff. It just doesn't, stack up.
I think everything, we're going to make a given that everything was created by God during creation. Every single thing was created by God during creation, and it all flows from there.
That's what you're
These are just discoveries that we're doing now, but it's already been
Well, yeah, I'm saying these.
And should be a distinction between supernatural and just regular living miracles. And you're right about
like
that.
the supernatural of our era was the 6-day war. That some of the pilots said that they don't know how they won. That is supernatural. God was with them. That is very supernatural. The fact that the Iron Dome, that's supernatural. The fact that we found those tunnels, that is a miracle. Otherwise, we would have been wiped out Rosh Hashanah Day. Mm-hmm. So that, for me, those are the miracles of today. Mm-hmm. And those are supernatural.
Yeah. Let's try to qualify our discussion. If we lived in New York in the beginning part of the 19th century, and a fellow by the name of Joseph Smith walks over to us and says that the angel gave me these golden tablets that were written in Reformed Egyptian, I translate them to English, Book of Mormon, I'm a prophet, this is a new religion. Right? What is the logical question?
Well, prove it.
If we were to be honest, right, a skeptic would say, "How do I know that you're not lying?"
Because there's only one person.
That's right. That's right. Similarly, if Muhammad told us that he had a vision of God and he gave him this book of the Quran and he had this wonderful thing and he flew to Al-Quds with his super in his dream and he with his Al-Baruch with his horse and he tethered it to the wall and he went up to heaven. He met Jesus and Musa and Ibrahim and all these people. Right? What would you say? How do I know you're not lying? If Abraham came over to you and said, God told me to go to Israel, and God told me to go live there, and then he said go to Egypt, and he said go take my son and give him on a mountain, and then there was an angel. What would you say to him? Prove it. Because that's the logical question that we have to. That's the question that we have to engage if all these revelations, all these stories which are purported to be revelations from God, we have to ask ourselves the question: how do we know that it's not true? That it's not baloney, that it wasn't fabricated, that it's actually real. So what I'm talking about specifically is items of narrative that are supernatural. Stories that seem to be linked to the formation of certain religions. So, obviously, the Torah, we have lots and lots and lots of those. And we're going to try to see if we could prove one way or the other whether or not these things are accurate, that they're historical. How do we know that these things happened? And if these things happened, what do they imply? Of course, there's miracles all around us. Of course. Absolutely. Those are called hidden miracles. And those are little pieces of information. If we were to harness it correctly, we could develop a relationship with God. It means if you stop for a second and say, oh my goodness, I have so much going for me. I have oxygen that's so plentifully available on our planet and our planet alone. And if I went to, Mars or any other planet, there's no oxygen, right? I would just die within 2 minutes, right? That's a good exercise. Say, hey, it's kind of nice that we have so much the right amount of oxygen, and the sun is actually 92.6 million miles away. And if we a little closer away, we'd all be dead. And the fact that there's a nice wind system that makes life on inland, not just coastal areas, possible. That we can have kind of like a conveyor belt for rain. You know that if we didn't have wind. And this is the only place that we know that has wind. If there was no wind on this planet, you wouldn't be able to live in Kansas City. You know why? Because it will be an arid desert. Why? Because there will be no rain. Because the rain comes from the water, and the water pulls it up, and then you have a cloud, but the cloud is near the water. And how does that cloud get to Kansas City? It only gets there thanks to the wind. So yes, these are examples, and I think this is very legitimate. I think it is germane to our subject. Now, we're Jews. We're Jews, and because we're Jews, we have a certain set of beliefs. Now, this may be politically incorrect, even though everyone knows it's true. And that is that our religion is mutually exclusive from Christianity, which is mutually exclusive from Islam. Right? We cannot, like the bumper sticker says, coexist. We can coexist, but not one of us is wrong. Right? The Muslims say, right? If you're not a Muslim, Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb, which is a basic fundamental principle of Islam. There's the nation of Islam and the nation of the sword, right? Part of the basic fabric of their belief. Either with us, right, or you better be with us. So you're a dhimmi, which is a lower class, or if you're a monotheist, or Dar al-Harb, a nation of a sword. Just I don't know what any implications. It means peaceful swords, obviously. Christianity says you got to believe in JC. You don't believe in JC, well, you're eternal damnation, right? Those two things don't coexist. So, in reality, if we really just break it down to the logical conclusion, we have at least 1 billion people, at least, that are wrong. Super duper wrong. At least. There's no other solution. Is there any other conclusion that we could say, logically? Well, Rabbi, everyone's just... That's true. I agree. I'm not trying to coerce anyone to believe anything. But if you just take the perspective of the two major, quote-unquote, monotheistic religions, just the basic belief, they cannot possibly both be true. It's not possible. Judaism, what we believe in, can also not possibly be true if Christianity or any other religions are true. So... I think this kind of raises the bar of our discussion. We have a belief, we have a doctrine, we have a system of tenets that we hold dear, we teach our children, we support our institutions, right? We invest time and energy, and we go to classes, right? And we're doing this based on a certain understanding that we're right. If we're wrong, then we're wasting our time. If we're wrong, well, then we better find out that we're wrong and fix it. Because the gravity of this decision is very big, very large. How so? Now you say, Rabbi, you're preaching a lot, and it's very unsettling. Let people believe what they want to believe, and I agree that that's legitimate. But I also think that it's important for us to realize, this is why I said you'll be agitated. The mission accomplished, right? You'll be agitated, but you have to agree that probably the most important item of information that you have to decide to navigate your life with is what is your basic principles of faith. Now, if you're a Jew, it means you live a certain life. You have certain priorities, right? You do certain things. Right? Your life is governed by this principle, right? If this principle is wrong, then you're so it's a very important decision where you're going to kind of lay your eggs or rest your eggs or throw your chips and whatever. Rest your head, yeah. Yes.
I'm having trouble with this.
Yeah.
Okay, so the fact that I may believe in Judaism to me doesn't mean that somebody that believes in Christianity or whatever it is wrong. Or
it has to be.
Remember, I didn't say that. I never said that. What I said is,
not true.
What I said is that Christianity and Islam are mutually exclusive. Now, I didn't say that. I didn't say. Now, we don't believe in proselytizing. This is an important point. Judaism is the one religion that says you don't have to be Jewish to be good. Right? Famously, we say, as the Talmud declares, Maimonides codifies and canonizes, that Chasidei Umot Ha'olam Yesh Lahem Chelek L'Olam Haba, which means the righteous of the Gentiles, has a portion of the world to come. Which means you don't need to be Jewish to be good. So, thankfully for all of them, provided that they're good people, who do the Noahide laws, which is just the basic, bare minimum of living a socially acceptable life, they can be good people, and that's fine. But what I said is that if Christianity that has a my way or the highway attitude, and Islam as well, right, they both can't be right. It means you can't be a good Christian from the Muslim perspective. You can't. And vice versa.
Are some people not saying our way is
now,
or the highway? Isn't it sort of the same?
No, well, for us, the Jewish perspective
They
is
say it more subtly, but
no. The Jewish perspective is yes, we're right, but that doesn't indict everyone else.
Doesn't say you can't.
could it not be that it's
And
right
in
for
fact-
us, but not necessarily?
Yeah, and in fact, we discourage conversions. You know
I mean,
that.
if they were born Jewish, then they would believe the same thing, right? If they weren't. So,
And
Well,
there are
they
a
may
lot
not.
of good people out there that I think have adopted
I mean,
Jewish philosophies, which have made them good and
But we're
do
the
good
only
deeds. and
religion that accept
help the
other
world, and
religions
that's good.
as theirs. Like if the
That's
Christianism say, if you're not Christian, then you're doomed.
I mean,
The
we're
same as
gonna
the Muslims,
burn
but
in hell
we
forever.
accept them, and
Right.
so we're the only good religion.
And a perspective. I think this last the conversation. Maimonides famously writes. He says that the Jewish philosophical perspective on the role of Islam and Christianity is that in the ideal world, we are God's ambassadors. We are the moral guardians of the world. Right? We're the light to the nation. That's the Jewish people in their best. Right? We're the ones who are going to teach the world about God. In the temple, it was a temple of Jewish service, but Gentiles were bringing in sacrifices all the time, right? Because it was a hub. Ki beiti beit tefilai kol ha'amim. It's a very famous verse. For my home, the temple, is a home of worship for all the nations, right? So ideally, the Jewish people would be the ones to teach the world about God. Now, for whatever reason, we couldn't do it alone, so to speak. And two massive movements, religions, came to be, which started off as offshoots of our religion. Christianity, as we well know, it was just a subsect of Judaism for the first 100 years until Paul came along and started accepting Gentiles and abrogated the law, which said that the law is no longer active, and he kind of made Judaism and Christianity into two separate religions. And even Islam, the day of rest of Islam was Saturday, and instead of sticking their tushis to Jerusalem when they bowed down to Mecca, they would also face Jerusalem, right? The early Muslims faced Jerusalem, and even the 5 daily prayers of Islam is modeled after the 5 prayers on Yom Kippur. There's one day a year that we have 5 prayers.
Oh my God.
One day a year. Most days it's only 3. Morning, afternoon, evening. On Shabbat and holidays and Rosh Chodesh, today's Rosh Chodesh as well, you have 4 prayers. So you add the Musaf. And on Yom Kippur, the one day a year where you have 5, there's Nil, an additional prayer. So the 5 is daily Islamic prayers is modeled after the Yom Kippur of the Jewish people. The word for Medina, which is the second holiest place in Israel, the word Medina, what does Medina mean? City or state, is it a coincidence that the Islam's second most holy place happens to have a Hebrew name?
Medina. Oh yeah, Medina, Israel.
Nice,
Medina.
yeah. So yes, these started off as being somewhat Muhammad famous. We know that Muhammad tried to court Jews. But the success of these religions is undeniable, and the fact that the majority of the world today, if you speak to them about the idea of one God, it's something that they're familiar with. As opposed to 2,000 years ago, when the Roman historian Dio Cassius writes that the Romans had an excess of 30,000 gods, and that was common practice. The Jewish people were the anomaly. We were the only ones. We had this crazy whacked idea that there's only one God, it's only one, and there's no other powers aside from Him. That was a brand new idea. They had a God for everything. 30,000 according to their tests now. Remember, Roman historians are notorious for exaggeration. But either way, we see that this idea of monotheism took over the world basically in the last 2,000 years. And the idea of the Jewish people teaching the world about God, that was done in tandem with these two other religions that sprouted out of Jewish customs and philosophy. So yes, does that address your question, Karen? Yeah. Food for thought. Excellent.
So those two religions came from Judaism.
Well, and the philosophy. Remember, the philosophy.
Another one.
The major difference, in my opinion, is we have been tolerant of the other religions.
Well,
they have not been tolerant of us.
Well, that's
They have persecuted us, they have expelled us, and they have killed us.
But that in and of itself doesn't make a religion valid, I don't think. I mean, I'm not just, that may be true, but to me
It might not may be true, it is true.
Okay.
More Jews were killed by Christianity than any other
All right,
any
so
other
accepting
religion.
that it's true doesn't necessarily mean that.
doesn't invalidate the legitimacy of
Well, if you believe that those religions are valid, we don't have a Torah. We don't have anything to believe.
Well, yeah, but that alone doesn't.
Well, that might suffice to what they might believe, but to us, if we believe in Christianity or Muslim, we don't have a Torah.
Well, that's true.
It destroys
That's
our
true,
faith.
but Karen's saying from an intellectual perspective, the fact that they were kind of bad and cruel to us
Or
doesn't
just because
alone.
we believe one thing doesn't mean that they might not believe something else.
If you go back before Jesus was born, if you ask any Christian what was the one true religion at that time, they're going to say Judaism.
Forget about.
Muslim, what was the one
Right.
true religion at that time? It was Judaism. So they all agree that
Yeah, you don't even have to.
Judaism was the true
You don't even have to talk about before Jesus was born. Jesus himself. It's only 100 years later.
He
You
died
know?
as a Jew.
Yeah.
He
And-
died as a Jew.
And the books, the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were written according to the earliest estimates, like 40, 50, 60 years after Jesus is dead. So, which is very important, by the way. This brings me to our next point. And Lynn, you had a comment.
I just wanted to go back to, Abraham really was the first one. It wasn't, the Romans were saying about that the Jews have the one God. It goes back,
Yeah, we know for sure. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, with Abraham, and really when you look at it, Abraham was the first one to start this idea when you were saying originally about how do you prove when Abraham says, God talked to me and he said,
Yeah, that's still an open question.
Right. So, but it seems like everyone accepts this idea of the one God, which actually came from Abraham.
That's right.
Predated
That's right.
Sodom.
That's right. But that doesn't prove anything.
But it seems like the world accepts this idea of monotheism, which was actually started by Abraham.
That's true. And you're bringing a very interesting point. You're saying, listen, and I think Panina hinted at this point. You're saying, listen, what the Christians and Muslims are doing is what's called replacement theology. What they're going to do is they're going to say, listen, the Jewish people, the Torah narrative, the Sinai experience, the whole thing, 100% accurate. They're not contesting a single letter in it. Nothing. Right? However, the Jews screwed up. The Jews didn't do their job. Right? And it was given over to us. We replaced them. And the Muslims say the same thing. The Muslims say, yeah, of course, JC was this, and Musa was that, Moses was that, and Ibrahim was that, and for sure. But they lost it, and now we're the final ones. So they're all agreeing that at one point in time the Torah was valid. And what's interesting is that if the Torah ever was valid, it always is valid, because we know 3 places in the Torah it says that this is the final Torah. Don't add, don't subtract. Twice in Deuteronomy 4 and once in Deuteronomy 11. Right? It says it multiple times. That's just off the top of my head. Multiple times in the Torah, and it indicates it many times that this is it. There's no adding. We don't. The book of Joshua, the book of Samuel, all these other books that came after the 5 books of the Torah don't have any mitzvahs in them. They don't notice that. The mitzvahs that we have. How many mitzvahs are there in the Torah? 613. How many of them are written in the 5 books of the Torah? Every single last one of them. Why? Because the Torah that we have, the instructions that we have, was sealed with Moses. That's it. The book of Joshua, the book of Samuel, the book of Kings, all the subsequent books, says the Talmud, would not have been written if the Jews didn't sin. I.e., they only were a product of the lessons that the prophet in their generation felt the need to teach the Jewish people about, because they might have a use for it. But if the Jewish people are not sinned, then you wouldn't need them, because they contain no mitzvahs. Why? Because the instructions for the Jewish people start and end in the Torah. And that's it. There's no adding, there's no subtracting. And the Torah says that if you have someone who says and wants to change something, that's a false prophet. If a prophet comes and says, I want to change one iota of the Torah, that's an indication of him being a false prophet. And you will be an eternal nation for me. What does that mean? It means it ain't changing. And the second you admit, there's a certain admission to the fact that it was once true, it always is true. Okay? I wanted to get to my point. Before we finish here, because so we have all these miracles in the Torah. We have and the question we have to ask ourselves: how do we know it's true? And also, what does it imply? Those are the two questions. How do we know it's true? What does it imply? And if Joseph Smith tells us that he had miracles, we say, how do we know it's true? And he says, well, I told you, well, then he's lying. Or maybe he's not lying, but we don't know. It's very weak evidence. Muhammad says he has a dream. It's also a question, right? Paul on the way to Damascus has a revelation. We say, how do we know, right? Abraham says to his people, Abraham says, God spoke to me. We say, prove it. Exactly. So we have many miracles in the Torah. How do we know that these things are any different than the miracles of other religions? And how could we be so sure that these miracles are significant? Now, the significance of who cares if it's accurate or not? Right. Our Torah, our religion, our Judaism is governed by this book, by this document, more than anything else. Everyone would agree to that point. I think across the spectrum of Jewish perspective, if you were to say which one document represents Jewish ideas, Jewish philosophy, it's the Torah. Everyone agrees. This Torah, if it's not true, then our religion is based on false premises. So, but if it is true, then we know that we're right, and we know that our religion is based on very strong premises. So is there any way, is there any indication, is there any insight that we could take from this book to say that it's true? And then the miracles are true, and if the miracles are true, and God indeed did speak to Moses, then we know we have a legitimate document. Otherwise, we say, Moses, you're coming to tell us that you had this revelation from God. I didn't see it. How do we know it's real?
Supposedly the nation saw it, but that was so many thousands of years ago.
Ooh, okay, when he dropped the bomb.
Well, that was in Sinai.
Mushrooms. There is a qualitative difference between the miracles that we're told from other religions. I'm not trying to bash other religions, as I mentioned earlier, but just the qualitative between those miracles and miracles in the Torah. And I want to build this up from the ground up. We all know this is a simple, basic understanding. You cannot get 1,000 people to all collaborate on a lie, much less 3 million, right? It's not possible. If it were to be possible, right, we could do a lot of things. We could start religions, no problem, right? But if you look at all the 42,000 religions that we have, the extant religions we have, none of them share the same qualitative factor of the nature of the revelation like we do. Every religion starts the same way, every single one. There is a prophet, or someone who claims to be a prophet, who says, I have a certain vision, I have a certain insight, I have a certain prophecy, and now I have a doctrine, right? God came to me and said, you're the man, Muhammad, right? And here's the Quran, and this is what the people should do, right? Joseph Smith, Paul, every religion is the same. Judaism, the revelation was on a published stage. Millions, we'll get to your point. You said it. Millions of people that saw it. Now, I want to say another important point. We think of the revelation, the Sinai experience, as being a one-day experience. And indeed, what happened at Sinai was a one-day experience of national prophecy. How do we know it's national prophecy? Because it says in the Torah. Remember, it's a claim. We'll say how to know the claim is accurate. That's the next question. That's the claim. Right? You open the book of Exodus, and it's very important. We have a movie from 1956 which portrays the Jewish people and Moses going up to get the Torah, and Jewish people going to do right, the sin of the golden calf. Right? And that's false imagery. Just open the book. Take any copy of the Torah. Go to Exodus chapter 20 or Deuteronomy chapter 4, when it talks about the Sinai, just read what it says. And every single one saw it. Every single person was there, and they had prophecy. And it says it again and again and again and again. And remember, this is the claim. We'll say how we know it's accurate. The claim is, the story goes, all the people had this prophecy, and that was the foundation of the religion.
Wait, all the people have the prophecy?
That's right. Which means...
Yeah.
Prophecy means a communication with God, and God tells the Jewish people the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai. They have these. You read what it describes. It describes it as they're seeing things. They're seeing this crazy fire, right? They're seeing sounds. It says, the entire nation is seeing sounds. It's describing something which is the entire nation. Remember, that's the claim. And when he says, "How do we know it's accurate?" Which is the next point. No one else has this claim. Right? The legitimacy of the claim is still in question. But the claim that for the foundation of our religion is different than every other religion. Why? It's not just one guy, Muhammad, one guy, Paul, one guy, Joseph Smith, waking up and saying, "This is my I had a revelation." Rather, it's millions of people claiming that. Or at least the book says a million people claim that. Okay? Yeah, that's true. And we'll get to how we know that that's accurate. Next thing. It's important to mention that this is not the only time that the entire nation, according to the book, the entire nation experienced a miracle of prophecy. In fact, they lived 40 years and they consumed manna.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, this is, remember, according to the book. Don't lose that point. Where did they have to drink? There was a rock, enormous rock. This is according to the Torah. There was an enormous rock. Right? Moses hit a rock, and just torrents of water just came out and just kept them giving the Jews to drink. Every day, food fell down from heaven. Every single day, their clothing grew with them for 40 years. You know, a lot of people don't know this, but there was a cloud surrounding the Jewish people during the day. Right. It flattened out the mountains. They were just able to walk. There was at night there was a fire. This is continuous, ongoing miracles, according to the Torah, according to the book. We'll get to how they know the book is accurate. But it's narrative of ongoing miracles. The entire Jewish people were there who went through the Red Sea. Right?
What about, for example, people witnessed Christ walking on water?
Okay, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. Because, okay, let me quickly answer your point. How do you know that that's true? It's documented. Where's it documented?
No, but many people witnessed it. I'm not talking whether it's documented, but many people.
Okay, but remember, you have to go through the whole story. Many people witnessed it according to which document? According to the Gospels. When were the Gospels written? 60 years later.
Also,
okay?
There's lots of versions of the New Testament. That's the difference.
That's true as well.
Many versions, yeah.
That's true as well.
We don't have any descendants that said, my
And
mother's
as opposed to the Torah, this is the next important point. It's national prophecy. It's national miracles. It's an ongoing. Moses, we know that a lot. I think it's one thing that people don't know. Moses, you read at the end of Exodus. Moses had a certain a shine to his face. It was so bright he had to wear a mask. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Ever heard that?
No.
Yeah. Moses wore a mask.
No.
Yeah, it's in Exodus. You got to read it. Moses wore a mask because his face was like the sun. People couldn't bear it. They couldn't deal with it. Right. Moses.
After he went to the mountain and got the Torah.
When he would go talk to Hashem.
He would take off the mask. It's in the book. It's in the book. So remember, the book is claiming that there's not only this one massive event, or splitting the sea, or this one massive event of all the 10 plagues, or this one massive event of the Sinai experience. It's an ongoing event. They see Moses for 40 years. Right? And they're having manna come from the sky for 40 years. Okay, now, next very most important point. This is all documented in a book. Who got the book? Who wrote the book? When is the dating of the book?
Hashem wrote the book.
Well, Moses wrote the book.
I'm sorry. No.
Wrote the book.
Yeah.
Moses
Hashem
wrote the
gave
book,
it, yeah.
and Moses delivered it to this very same people who had these experiences. I cannot stress this point enough. Moses gives the book to the people who could easily verify whether or not this is true. Right? If I was Moses and we just went 40 years in the desert and we were starving the whole time, and I gave you a book that describes manna falling from heaven, you say this book is garbage. Would you start observing the Shabbat and not collect twigs on Shabbat because the silly book says so?
Wasn't the book delivered before they left the wilderness?
Moses, the day before he died, wrote 13 copies of the book. Gave one, and it says, and Moses wrote and gave to the Jewish people. Right? The book itself was given to the Jewish people, to the people themselves. It wasn't years later someone came up with this book and says, oh, the stories, and everyone forgot about it. And the book claims that there's millions of people. Nay, the book claims specifically, I want to be accurate here, 603,500 adult males between the age of 20 and 60. That's what it says. We can assume there's a corresponding amount of females. We can assume that there's some youngsters and old people. Right?
Yeah.
So the assumption is that it's at least 1.5 million, but maybe up to 2 million, 3 million, who knows, right? That's the safe assumption, right? But millions of people saw this. They lived it. It wasn't just something that you could wake up in the morning. What did we see? I don't know. What did we saw? Maybe there's a lightning show. And Moses comes the next day and says, oh, what you saw was God. No, it was ongoing miracles. And it's in a book delivered to the very same people who experienced it. If Moses was making up the stories, right, the Jewish people never adopt the book. Remember, the book is weaved narrative and instruction. Narrative and instruction. It's one book that has stories and it also has instructions. And these instructions can be very difficult, very challenging. Right? If you received the book from Moses, okay, and you knew that there was even one letter about it that wasn't true, you wouldn't observe all these mitzvahs. You wouldn't say, I'm not eating this, I'm not eating that, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. Yeah. You wouldn't be... all the laws, very difficult, very restrictive. No one would do that if they knew it was baloney. And we have documentation. We know the Jewish people were fastidious about observing their religion. Right? We know that. How could such a religion have got started if it didn't happen in any other way? Find me, let's work this out. Give me a scenario where it's possible for the Jew. Now, the only scenario is there are a bunch of retards. So you have 3 million retards. But that's not plausible. You know why it's not plausible?
Jews.
Because Jews are the only ones that can be retards. Right? No other nation has this story.
We would disappoint our mothers if we were.
Yeah.
You know, and in fact, I want to say another point. If you look, I'll give you the source. I think it's very important to read this. I would advise everyone to find a Deuteronomy, read chapter 4. Just read chapter 4, because what I'm saying right now is basically chapter 4 of Deuteronomy. And it says, and it makes a prediction. If you read the prediction, you say, how could the Torah make such a prediction? It says, never has there been, and never will there be a claim of this sort. The Torah makes a prediction that there will never be a claim of any nation, of any religion, they've had national prophecy. Never. A claim. What do you mean? How can you possibly make such a... How could the Torah make such a prediction? How could the Torah predict that for the next foreseeable future or for eternity, there will never be a religion that will start off with the same narrative? You know why? Because the Torah is true. And the Torah is able to know that this is the only time that this will happen. Why? Maybe some charlatan will make up such a story. You can't make up such a story. It's impossible because it's easily proven to be false. Right? If Moses didn't give the Jewish people the document, the Jewish people would never accept it. What do you mean? The document itself says that Moses gave it to the Jewish people. If the Jewish people never had these traditions or these experiences in the desert, they would never adopt it. It says so many miracles, ongoing miracles, right? And it talks about them. And it says the manna. It talks about it in Exodus and in Deuteronomy. We know it's from beginning to end. Yeah. The water from beginning to end. The episode of Moses, right? These were miracles and prophecies and supernatural way of life. That wasn't just some dude, one individual. It was the entire nation. The Mount Sinai experience, the most significant experience in history, experienced by everyone. The whole ha'am and the entire nation saw it. And this is a book that the Jewish people adopted in its entirety. We still have it today. We're still dedicated to it. How would we have begun our adoption of it if it wasn't true? Now, imagine, let's paint this scenario. Let's say my name was Ezra. A lot of people say, oh, Ezra wrote the Torah, right? You heard that. Oh, Ezra wrote the Torah. unless you say that the Jewish people were incredibly unintelligent, which is that's the only solution, which is unlikely, right? Because there should be there can't even be one. We have no record of any. Let's say Ezra came and says, you know what? He collects a bunch of people, says, you guys are descendants of these people who had this wonderful experience at Sinai, and when they were in Egypt, and what's called, everyone forgot about it, and I'm the only one who has a record of it. And here's the book, and start observing. What would they say to Ezra? Say, wait a minute, Ezra.
Yeah, what? Yeah.
How come you're the only one who remembers this?
Yeah.
Right? How come I don't know about this? If this tradition happened, how come you're the only one who has some sort of record of it? Plus, how come we Jewish people don't have a record of this guy who restored Judaism? It wouldn't get started. The only way for us, for the centuries, and it's been documented by secular sources, by non-Jewish sources. Already, with the Torah was an obsession of the non-Jews already 200 years ago. We have the Septuagint. We have the Greek translation of the Torah. The Torah has been in non-Jewish hands for 2,300 years. It was a huge deal for a long, long, long time. Right? When did it get started? If not in this situation, yes.
I was just going to say that the fact that the first generation that witnessed all the miracles, the fact that God, after they disobeyed, there were 10 big incidents where they really violated the laws, and God said, okay, you're not going to go into Israel. At that point, it doesn't really say anything else about the first generation. It doesn't say they all committed suicide because they're not going to be led into the land. They continued to teach their children until they all died out.
Moses was still there.
Right. But that first generation, they continued to teach their children. So one thing that I think is amazing about the Jewish religion, in addition to having all these witnesses initially, was that it was taught by that first generation to the next generation that was actually going to go into Israel every single day, because the second generation knew what happened to the first generation, that they all died out, and they didn't want that to happen to themselves. So they
plus
really
they were getting manna
felt
delivered outside their tent every single day.
Right.
And you know what?
But they had that commitment to the Jewish religion because they saw if it's not observed,
That's true. But I
Can
think,
I just
yes,
say one thing?
say
And
one
to
thing.
her point is that it has continued exactly that way. That's the thing.
Well, that's
so
maybe we'll
amazing.
deal with next week.
Well, that's the amazing part of this.
Yeah,
because there aren't all these different versions, and everything, and people follow exactly the same laws, exactly the same way all over the world.
Yeah.
It's
And
incredible.
I want to say back to our point that we mentioned earlier. We said if Abraham comes over to us and says, "I had a prophecy,"
Correct.
right? If let's say Abraham did come over to us and say, "I have a prophecy," you know what we would say?
Because everybody,
Prove it.
That's you.
But
Yeah.
they come
Right?
from the same source.
And Jacob says he has a prophecy. We say, "Prove it," right? The only way that we know anything is because we know for sure that Moses was a true prophet. Now remember, right? I am a verified, especially with Torch, we're verified non-prophets. Right? I'm for sure not a prophet. But Moses, we were all there. We saw, or that generation saw Moses go up to the Torah. Moses, they heard booming. Moses come up to the mountain. They had this experience where Moses was the prophet. They knew him. They saw his face. They had to wear a mask. Can you imagine if you see someone whose face is as bright as the sun? He had to wear a mask. Right? Moses went up to the mountain. He disappeared for 40 days, right? Without food or drink, nothing. Just he's up the mountain, gone.
Isn't that why the Christians have translated as him having horns?
That's right.
Because he had shines, rays of shine.
The verse says ki karan or panav. The word karan, not Koran.
Not that Koran.
Koran means very bright, but it also means Karen. The word Karen, spelled the same way, means a horn.
So Michelangelo's Moses has horns on it.
Well, that's
Yeah.
actually that's another reason completely.
That's what they say, that the Jews have horns because of that.
Yeah, but
The people who were going through the wilderness, Moses, that they viewed this. All these people saw it.
yeah.
But what about the 2,000 years before? There wasn't the same generation.
So that's a good point. If Abraham Abraham could not have been the right guy to give us the Torah. You know why? Because we didn't know he was a prophet. He was a prophet. How do we know he's a prophet? Because Moses tells us. Moses is a different qualitative prophet. We say Moses is the father of all prophets. What does that mean? One of the 13 principles of Maimonides, Moses is the father of all prophets. What does that mean? Abraham lived hundreds of years beforehand. What it means is that if Abraham told us that he was a prophet, we would say we have no idea that we don't know you're true, right? We don't know. However, because Moses gave us a book that says that Abraham was a prophet, and Moses is reliable, and he's demonstrably reliable because we were there when we saw he was a prophet. It was clear to everyone. Therefore, Moses' word is true. So if Moses tells, the only reason why we know Abraham was a prophet is because Moses told us, and we know that Moses is telling the truth. Hence, the only reason why we know that anyone else is a prophet is because of Moses. Moses is the father of all prophets, right? Moses has been verified. Moses was there, right? Hence, the Torah, the most famous verse, the most common verse in the Torah is Vayomer Shem el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moses, saying, right? We know that when Moses comes and tells us, God told me this, we know he's a prophet.
So did God tell Moses about Adam and Eve, Abraham, Isaac?
The introduction of Nachmanides, he said, introduction to the Torah, he says that God tells Moses, write Bereshit, write Bara, write Elohim, right?
Yeah.
It was dictated to Moses by God. Now another point, yes.
Well, in addition, there were 10 generations from Abraham to Moses.
That's right.
And so when Abraham, he taught 10,000 people in his travels with Sarah. So all these people are learning about monotheism, and the information came down. It came down from Abraham about the teachings about monotheism in addition to what you're saying, to Moses.
Well, Moses was the descendant. Those 10,000 people that you're referencing from Genesis, we don't know where they are. We don't know where they are. They're gone.
I think that's a false premise there, Lynn.
Well, no, it's not a false. It's not a false.
Well, because we don't know. Nobody knows what Abraham did.
Well, we know what the Torah tells
The
us.
Torah said, but not
That's
at
right.
the time. We don't know.
Those 10,000 taught, and then for 10
It seems likely that those 10,000 disappeared because we don't have no record of them.
Right, but
Maybe their souls are somewhere, or whatever.
Moses picked it up from.
No, Moses didn't need that. Moses is direct descendant.
No, but I'm saying in addition to what you're saying.
Maybe this influenced the greater world because those were not his descendants. Abraham's descendants, and especially Isaac, as the verse says, "Tibi Yitzchak yikareh lecha zera." Isaac is the spiritual heir of Abraham, and Jacob is the spiritual heir of Isaac. So, and the tradition was taught from then on down. But remember, if Abraham comes to us and tells us, "I'm a prophet," we have no way of verifying that.
Okay, so the people,
Moses, on the other hand, there's millions of people that experienced him being a prophet. They heard, they saw with their own eyes, they heard with their own ears. Read Deuteronomy chapter 4, or read what it says in Leviticus. I think it's chapter 20. Read what it says. It says clearly that and we got the book from him. And if we didn't, then the book is false, and we throw out the book. And no one dedicates their life to a religion when they know for sure it's untrue.
So for 10 generations, the idea of monotheism was.
No, it was part of the family. It's part of the family. Yes, it's part of the family.
Yeah.
The idea of monotheism for sure. But
all teachings that
yes, we know that Abraham made tremendous outreach efforts, and like you said, he taught a lot of people. But we don't know where the people are now. Because you know what? They didn't have the Torah to keep that in place.
So you're saying that Moses got the idea of monotheism
From God.
From his parents.
Yeah.
From
He was,
Amram.
descendant
Amram
of
and Yocheved,
Abraham.
his parents.
Right. And so when he was nursing with Yocheved, she was teaching him. So where did she get it from? She got it from the generations before, right? Moses wasn't a descendant from them. It was just 10 generations after Abraham.
Was it actually 10 generations? I think it was a little bit less.
Well, it was 10 from Adam to
Moshe,
Abraham,
Amram,
and 10
Yitzhar.
It's
I
10
remember.
from Adam to Abraham, and 10 from
Ah.
Abraham to Moses.
My notes are at home.
No, it's 10 from Adam to Noah and 10 from Noah to Abraham.
Oh, 10 from Noah to Abraham.
Yeah. It was less. It was less. No, it wasn't 10. I think it was like 6, according to my calculation.
410 years in Mitzrayim.
Yeah, well, Moses was already. Yocheved was the daughter of Levi, Yeah. So then Moses, Yocheved, Levi, Yaakov, Yitzchak and Abraham.
So that was the beginning of faith there, in essence, because people in Sinai saw that, but then they went on faith that Moses must be telling the truth about everything.
Yes, means once Moses has been verified, and it's just
They
again and
assumed
again.
because he was truthful with that.
Well, they knew. They didn't assume. They knew he was a prophet. They had no doubt about that. They saw it. It was all clear. So this process, I know it was a little bit convoluted way that we ended up here, but this is the point. It's a very important point. We have a revelation. We have national revelation as recorded in the Torah. The Torah is a very important document the Jewish people had adopted en masse, or en masse, whatever, how you pronounce that. I'm not French or Latin, or wherever it is, right? The Jewish people adopted this document because they knew it was true. If they didn't know it was true, they would have discarded it. And who got the document? It wasn't that they got it 60 years later. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John write a book about Jesus. No, it's historical. It's contemporary. It's contemporary to Moses, and the people whose story is told in the Torah, those are the people that received the document, right? And if not, then the book is easily proven false. And if it's easily proven false, we know that people aren't going to change their lives and live a very, very stringent, rigid behavior as dictated by a book if they know that for sure the book is true. So this is a way that we could it's not, I won't say easily, but this is how we know. This is how we know. And we have evidence. And someone comes up and say, hey, you guys are no different than everyone else. You're just faith. You just believe because that's when you grew up, and that's your family, that's your school, that's your shul. No, we say no. We have a legitimate argument, a legitimate claim, reasonable, very logical, and we have yet to be, there's yet to be any questioning to this logic. And if there is, I'd love to hear it. If anyone finds a hole, we have a week now. We'll reconvene here next Tuesday. Find a hole in the argument. Find the hole in the argument. If there is, it's legitimate. We're trying to find the truth. Is there a hole in this argument, or is this document true?
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes.
As great as Moshe was, why do we start our tefillah by saying Elokei Abraham?
So this is very similar to the question Susan asked me a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
There's something distinct about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, them being the founders and the fathers. They're the only people that will be called fathers, right? Yeah. Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu. We say Moshe Rabbeinu.
Yeah,
We say Moshe Rabbeinu.
Exactly.
Teacher.
He's not an
Exactly.
Avinu.
So there's something. I discussed this with some people.
Why?
I said,
I asked him that.
yes, there's something distinct about the tchunot, the midot of the forefathers that is demonstrative or to the entire Jewish people. All Jews are descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as opposed to not all Jews are descendants of Moses. So if you look at Judaism, who's the fathers of our religion? Who do we come from? Who are our antecedents? And not only physically, but also spiritually. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses was a Jew. He was greater. No one, according to Jewish philosophy, Moses was greater than all three of them. That's Jewish philosophy. So it's not about greatness. It's about association as being the father of the nation. Make sense? You're like, Okay. If anyone has any questions or wants to discuss further, please don't hesitate to email whywolby at torchweb.org or check me out on my website, rabbiwolby.com. Huh? Great class. Thank you.
Yeah.
rabbiwolby.com. 149, soon to be 150 audio classes.